The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, and the northern part of what I consider to be the greatest state in the Union. Could have an argument with my guest today. As you know, folks, I speak with some of the most interesting people on the planet, really, on a regular basis. Today's no exception. The argument that we have is New York better than California. Ira Rosenfeld, welcome to Comfortably Zoned for the first time. How are you?
Thank God I'm doing well. I appreciate your having me here. I'm not sure exactly what to expect, but you know what? A fellow New Yorker who moved to California who also did stand-up, I figure it can't be all bad. So I'm willing to
in the same venues as you in the same venues you did in the 80s and 90s. When I did comedy, my home base was the Holy City Zoo. And we appeared on the same bills occasionally. We didn't know each other, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised
also. I think one of two things. Either we must have just missed each other by a few days or years or months. Either that or maybe your act just wasn't that memorable. So, like, you know.
Oh, it wasn't. That was
I'm kidding.
The key.
I'm sure your act was very memorable.
No. You inadvertently hit the nail right on the head. Let me ask you a little bit about your act. What was your best opening line when you got on stage? Your favorite opening line?
It's fun. Well, you know what? It's really kind of stupid, but I admit I always would start off by saying, yes, I am a Jewish guy named Ira. I'm a Jewish guy named after a bank account. Go figure. And I know it's like the best joke ever, but, you know, it set the tone for me being me. One thing I learned pretty early on is you have to have your own voice and opinion. You know, a lot of people can tell jokes well, but, you know, people have to have something to remember you by. And for me, it was by being myself. I know it sounds kind of self-indulgent in a way, and maybe it is, but, you know, to talk about things I relate to and how I relate to them and a little bit about myself, and I found that's how people remember you. So as stupid as that joke was, that was usually my opening line, just to acknowledge the obvious, you know.
Not at all stupid, and it really sets the tone for you being you, and that's
right.
Very
and then I had a pretty stupid follow-up also. I'm almost embarrassed when I think of some of the jokes I used to do. I would say, and yes, if anyone wants to open an Ira account, you're more than welcome. And I don't remember the exact setup, but something about how my girlfriend, back then I used it. Now I have all the jokes that were girlfriend jokes, and now my wife jokes. Something about the bank account, and I got a penalty for early withdrawal. And depending on that reaction, if they laughed, I'm like, okay, I can see it's a rowdy crowd. I don't have to hold any punches. And if they all went like, ooh, I say, okay, we're going to stick with the milk and cookie stuff tonight. I can see what kind of crowd this is. That was kind of like my gauge. It wasn't like my most funny stuff, but it was a little way to introduce who I am and kind of get a little gauge for the crowd.
Well, the one person that we know well and have in common was the late John Cantu, who was pretty much a character. You talk about people who are identified as they are. He put what he was about on the line, not just in comedy but in life, and he had some quirks, but one of the most interesting characters in the world.
He was definitely like anyone who knew comedy in San Francisco. Like he was like a pillar almost. Like people knew who he was. And I give him this also from I remember about him. He, you know, tried a lot of different things and was willing to put himself out there. He did like classes for a while. He recorded. They used to have the comedy festival and stuff where he was a part of that, and this is kind of how I got close with him at the time. Because I have an AV background also. I used to set up sound systems and stuff from my experience as a musician. You know, it is when you're doing comedy, you have to have a little income during the day in between your professional engagements sometimes. So
that really helps. A good day job that doesn't kill your spirit. Now, with that in mind, you have the ultimate day job as far as I'm concerned in terms of being a Jewish kid. You're a rabbi. How did that come about? And
it's still a little hard for me to believe, quite frankly. Every now and then, like someone says, "Hey, rabbi," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm the rabbi." It's one of those things I never really planned how it came about. So I grew up in an Orthodox family in Brooklyn. Not ultra-Orthodox, what we called modern Orthodox. I thought I was a liberal Jew compared to the ultra-Orthodox, but as I grew up, I realized, okay, it's still, Orthodox Judaism. So there were a lot of things I really loved about it. I'm not one of those who, is all hating on the way I grew up. But, I always joke, if you put together New Yorkers and Orthodox Jews, I mean, if you want to talk about opinionated people, an Orthodox Jew who's also from New York, they're going to have some pretty strong opinions about things. So I grew up in a household where...
Let me ask you this. If, when you were a kid, take yourself back to when you were a kid, and you had 2 or 3 classmates that you liked the very, very most, they were your close friends, would they have predicted you were going to be a comedian or a rabbi?
I think they would have guessed comedian long before rabbi. I think I surprised myself as well as just about everyone. Because I got to be honest, I was not the greatest student. I went to yeshiva, to Jewish day school, through high school. So I was really a rebel. I mean, I have to laugh. Compared to hardcore rebels, I wasn't that much of a rebel. But compared to the competition's not that tough with my local yeshiva boys. But I was the kind that would.
Did you read Chaim Potok when you grew up?
A little bit. The Chosen. Didn't he do The Chosen?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that's a great book, and the movie I liked a lot. Also, it's funny. I always thought it was the Chassan, because for those who not in Hebrew there's no ch sound, so usually when you say ch, you think it's the Chassan. So I thought it was the Chassan, which is the Yiddish word for the groom. I thought it was about a guy who was getting married. And then I come to watch it. I'm like, wait, this has nothing to do with the Chassan. It's the Chosen. Oh, now I get it.
Ah, yes. I want to know from you as an Orthodox Jew.
Well, I'm not Orthodox now. I grew up Orthodox. My approach now is very different.
Okay. Did they depict, or was the book, did it depict Orthodox Jews as they are?
I think, I always say I can't speak for every Jew in the world, but I think it was pretty authentic about the different types. There were extremes. I did grow up the first 2 years of my life. I don't have many memories, but I know the area was in Williamsburg, where there's a high concentration of ultra-Orthodox, Hasidic Jews, which is very much what was emulated in the story. So I thought it was fairly accurate. And, of course, there were the other Jews who were more, secular and approached Judaism in different ways, where it wasn't about, the scrutiny of the laws, but about the spirit of the history and heritage of Judaism that were a lot, different. So, yeah, I thought it was, I mean, it's been a long time since I've read the book. I can't honestly say I read the whole book, but I know I've seen the movie too.
Okay.
And I thought it was a pretty good depiction, I have to say, from my memory.
What precipitated your becoming a rabbi, and how did you make the decision?
Well, I'll tell you, this is depending on the mood I'm in on any given day. I either give my wife all the credit or I give my wife all the blame for how I ended up doing this. It all, see, when I met her, I had already made the transition. So as I mentioned, I moved to San Francisco pursuing a music career, and eventually realized, what do I got to schlep around all this musical equipment when these other guys are just standing around talking and making the same money without having thousands of dollars worth of equipment and having to deal with musicians and having to play for hours a night when the other guy just like chatted for a bit. So I made the switch to comedy, and that's what brought me to L.A. because after doing comedy for a while in San Francisco, I realized that as much as I love San Francisco and the Bay Area, like it's a great sense of community in the art world. You know, the comics really worked with each other and knew each other, but it was a little hard to break out of who I was. Like, people knew me as this guy who worked his way up from being an open micer to then hosting the open mic night and then being an opener and worked my way to feature act and then got to headline on the road. And I felt like I needed to get a fresh start. And I always thought that L.A. is the kind of place that no matter how accomplished you are, when you come to Los Angeles, you're a nobody. So I said, look, I'm already a nobody, so why should I wait till I become a somebody and then become a nobody again? I'm already a nobody. Why don't I go to L.A. while I'm a nobody and maybe I'll become a somebody?
You know,
that's how
right there, you were doing you do a little Jackie Mason inadvertently, and we were talking about the late Jackie Mason, who passed away in the last few days. How was he an influence on your life? Obviously, in your pacing, I can hear him in you. Or
yeah,
you
I got some of his spirit in me. I learned two great things from him. One, I will say this. When I visited back in Brooklyn one time, I was already doing stand-up, and my parents said, we got you tickets to see. He had his show, The World According to Me, was on Broadway, and my parents, as a gift, got me tickets to see it. And I'll be honest, I mean, I kind of knew who he was, and I knew a little bit about his comedy. Part of me was like, I mean, obviously I'll be gracious and go and thank them, but I was thinking, great, and I got to listen to another Catskill hack comic. I'm like, fine, let's go and I'll enjoy it. But I got to tell you, when I saw him, till today, I do not think of all the great comics I have ever seen anyone like have people laughing out of control, like falling out of their seats kind of laughter. The way he had that audience going. I mean, people were like out of control. They couldn't control. They were literally like falling out of their seats. And I've seen a lot of the greats. I've been lucky to work with some of the greats. I've never seen anybody killed the way he killed at his venue. So I learned that from him. He knows how to milk a joke. He has his callbacks. Like, once he gets you on something, he keeps coming back to it and has other stories. So that's the great thing I learned from him is his sense of being himself and his timing, which was awesome. But I'll be honest, I learned something else from him. I also learned that you got to know your audience, because I don't know if you remember this. He had a TV show that did not last for very long. I don't remember that. It was with, I think, Lynn Redgrave or something. It was a story about him and his shiksa, his non-Jewish wife, and the show did not pan out, and it died quickly. And I learned something really great from him also on the flip side of it. For the right audience who knows a little bit about Jewish culture, it's hilarious stuff, because it's no secret. A big part of his routine was about the difference between how Jews handle things and how Gentiles do it. Obviously a lot of it was making fun of his own, which any good comic should do. You got to start by making fun of your own, and then that gives you a little bit of license to reach out and start, sticking it to others also. But for those who don't know Jewish culture, it's not that funny, because, they don't get it. So I learned that he was great in the big cities and in his right venues, but as far as going national and, being in the heartland of America, I don't think his comedy really flew. So I learned that from him also, which helped me a lot, because, I was lucky to travel all over the country. I jokingly say I traveled, I actually performed in 23 states. I was a state of unconscious one day and a state of dismay, like a lot of states. And I also traveled extensively around the country.
And here we are in the state of confusion.
Exactly. That's probably the state I performed in more than anything else. But I learned, I can't do, Jewish humor specifically if I'm in Iowa. They don't relate to it. They don't get it. And it's not that they're stupid. Yeah. I mean, they may or may not be, but it's not evidenced by whether or not they laugh at my jokes about Judaism. So I realized I have to talk about things that people can relate to on their terms. So you have to really know
now,
your
what
audience.
What were some of these things specifically that
I'll
you
give you an
felt
example about what someone else
that you felt that their terms are different than your terms?
Well, like the nuances of, like, if I know I have a Jewish crowd, there are certain Jewish jokes I can do about Jewish holidays or about Jewish, way of thinking, or at least the stereotypical way, or like little plays on word for people who are a little familiar with a little bit of Yiddish or Hebrew. Like, it just wouldn't fly. I remember when I was traveling in Florida, I came across a New York comic who was like all ticked off at everybody in Florida. I'm like, what's up? He says, you know what? The people here, they're a bunch of freaking idiots. I'm like, all right, maybe may or may not be true, but why do you say that? You know why? I'll tell you what. I'm doing my subway material. This stuff freaking kills in New York. I'm doing it here in Florida. I'm getting nothing. They're freaking idiots. And I'm thinking, they may not be idiots, but they don't relate to the subway. They may know what it is, but they've probably never been on one, and they don't relate to the jokes about something that they've never experienced.
And it certainly doesn't take an idiot not to take the subway.
Exactly. Like I say, he may be right. I'm not saying anyone in Florida is smart or not smart. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I'm sure, like anywhere else, there are smart people and idiots.
I'm sure you do have some opinions on whether or not they're smarter in Florida. What do you think of the 41%? What do you think of the divide that's consuming us? And will we ever be able to get through it?
That's a tough one. To get more serious, it's really troubling for me. One thing I'm really all about is achdus, or achdut, as they say in Hebrew, is, the oneness, and to find things we have in common and to come together. And, unfortunately, it's often through tragedy that people come together. When we have a common enemy, we come together. When bad things happen, we come together as a country. And it's unfortunate that it has to be that way. I just feel when you get too extreme on either side, it becomes an issue. I have issues with the alt-left. I have issues with the alt-right. So I consider myself alt-center. I try to go by issue and not feel like I have to declare that I'm left or right. It depends on the specific issue. And as a Jew, anti-Semitism is across the board. It doesn't mean that you're left or right. Unfortunately, there are factions within each. So I'm very concerned when people get too extreme on either side. I'm a big fan of trying to understand other people. I may not always agree, but at least being able to discuss it. And what's troubling for me, and a lot of this I think gets down to the way the media works. I really feel, because the media, they want good, compelling stories that's going to sell advertising time and get people watching. So they don't want to tell the stories about all the people who get along and the stories about all those who may be. I have a couple a family we work with where the wife is a Republican and the husband is Democrat, and they manage to get along and work through it. So there's a lot of cases.
That's what my parents were like. Yeah, my parents were, but that in the 50s, there wasn't the divide between Democrats and Republicans that there is now. An Adlai Stevenson wasn't that much different than an Eisenhower, and but today there seems to be the divide that can never be healed. Maybe that sounds negative, but what I'd like to know is what is going to heal us if I'm incorrect? How are we going to come together?
Far be it from me to say that. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than it may seem, but to me it comes out to one simple thing. I can't change what everybody in the world thinks. I can only look at how I behave. And for me, I've found that when people could put a face on things, it tends to bring things closer together. Because so often we talk about the other, we don't really know the other. Like, growing up in Brooklyn, anybody who was from New Jersey, they're a freaking idiot. Like, we didn't even know anybody from New Jersey, but we just knew they're on the other side of the water, they got to be freaking idiots.
You missed out on Bayonne, the city of industry. You missed out on Bayonne, New Jersey, the city of industry, a city that's much like Alameda on the West Coast. So got to put in a good word. All New Jersey, New Yorkers have an inflated view sometimes of their own situation. And so what did you listen to?
You know what? It wasn't just
music?
that. Anybody from one of the other boroughs was probably an idiot also. Like the Manhattanites, oh, what's the matter? You're too good for us. If you're from the Bronx, you're an idiot. If you're from Queens, you're an idiot. Unless it's a girl. If you were dating a girl from Queens, that wasn't so bad. But if you actually liked the guy who lived in Queens, and I say this jokingly, you know, the truth is for me, I think humor would go a long way in healing. You know, humor, I think, is extremely healing because a lot of difficult subjects that can get very tense, if you approach it in a more humorous way, you can kind of see it like all these things I say, they're jokes, they're ways to like look at those obvious differences and have some humor about it. You know, I'm one of those who, I'm not a big fan of the word tolerate. When people say, oh, we have to tolerate others, to me that's very like self-righteous to be like, well, look, I know that I'm right and what I'm doing is correct, but I'm going to tolerate other people because that's the kind of great person I am, so I can tolerate them. You know, I think celebrate is the word. We want to find ways to celebrate other people, other cultures, and realize that we're all human beings and we're all on this planet under the same sun and have to find ways to come together. But for me, the way to bring it together is not by avoiding all the things and like the cancel culture or anything like that, but to be a little bold and a little irreverent and talk about the things that a lot of people are thinking about anyways and bring it to the forefront and make people realize how ridiculous it is. And through that humor and honesty, that's how we bring people together, not by saying, well, you can't say that, you can't say this, you might insult somebody. You know, if someone gets insulted, you know, that's life. You got to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's been the political correctness, as I see it, political correctness has been the death of comedy. And to
a large extent, look, I think to some extent you got to be careful about things that really trigger people a lot. But like, on the other hand, like when it comes to comedy or any entertainment, like people don't have to come if they don't like it. No one's forcing them. So, I mean, if they know what they're signing up for, then, you know, it should all be loose. Like, I'm not a huge fan of people who are extremely graphic and get, like, really nasty. I'm not against it. If someone's funny, I don't care how dirty it is or how politically incorrect it is. But I don't like people who get the laughs just because of the fact that they're irreverent. You know what I mean? Like, Schimmel was brilliant and funny, and he was graphic, but it wasn't the fact that he was dirty that was funny. It was funny material. And he was the guy who was always the victim in it. So Robert Schimmel, that kind of dirty, I didn't mind. But other guys who just, like, because of the fact that they're graphic and shocking, that's not amusing to me. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, I had plenty of that. That's not entertainment for me. So I'm not against those who are irreverent.
Who made you laugh when you were a kid?
Well, when I was a kid, truthfully, I didn't like that many stand-up comics per se. I liked a lot of different shows. Like, I grew up being a huge Honeymooner fan. Like, we were supposed to, you know, in yeshiva, we were supposed to be reviewing and you know, the Talmud of the day. We would get together in groups. But instead, we would be just riffing lines from the Honeymooners back and forth, basically, and doing routines like that. So I didn't like stand-up as much back then as, like, comedy shows. We used to do these like shows for like Hanukkah and Purim where I got to play Ralph Cramden. I loved it, you know, just acting nuts and crazy. And there were like different skits from Saturday Night Live I used to like. So the stand-up I developed a little bit later. But I like to appreciate the great storytellers, truthfully. Like I like, you know, the old guys like who the one-liners, Henny Youngman, I have a lot of affinity for. I used to like Stephen Wright a lot, but I came to realize the kind of humor that they had, like, was nice in short spurts, but, you know, how long can you listen to just disjointed jokes one after the other? It gets, like, hard to follow. But when you have someone who's a good storyteller, you know, Rita Rudner became one of my favorites when I started really looking into comedy. She was pretty darn big, but never hit, like, the super big time. But basically, her act was so well honed. It was basically set up, punchline, but it was done in telling the story. Like every one of those set up punchlines was telling the story about the relationship with her British husband or whatever it was, her dog flying. It was all jokes, but it was set up in a story, and to me that's what good comedy is about. Because people remember the characters and the stories. People remember stories. Till today, as a rabbi, I love telling stories. It's so much easier for people to get the message through a story than to try to just impart facts on them as a rabbi, or to just, have one-liner jokes. I mean, I love a good one-liner, but that's why I thought Stephen Wright was great on The Tonight Show, because for 7-8 minutes, it's great. But yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to listen to 45 minutes to an hour of just random, one-liners. It gets hard to listen to after a while.
Well, when you're that clever, though, like Stephen Wright is, he can carry it off. There are very few.
Yeah, I've never seen him do the full 45. I just have to wonder. And don't get me wrong, I loved him. I thought this. He got a laugh by saying thank you. Like he had he was so like the opposite of like a Jim Carrey type, where he was so right. Just the way he said thank you was funny.
Yes, he was what they call dry. You don't hear that expression, dry humor, much anymore. He still continues to make a career, and he's terrific. I want to ask you one more question about with the idea of getting to know you. What type of music influenced you? You said you're a drummer.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, thanks for asking that. I tell you what, I like music very much like I like food. I love to try anything, I know some people are very specific about what they like to eat. I'm the kind of guy, I want to try everything on the menu. I love a combo special. I like to try things, and that's how I am with music. I started off like a lot of kids. I used to listen to rock, and I would listen to some of the drummers. Who got me into playing? Like, they were the drummers I aspired to be like, and then the other ones I would say, like, man, I can do that. Like, I would listen to Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and I'm like, this guy is real. That is the way to do drums right there. And I'm like, I don't know if I could ever do that. But then I would listen to the drummer from like AC/DC, and I'm like, I can do that. I can just go boom, ba, boom, ba. So I started playing, and then, I had a circle of friends who were drummers, guitarists. We would just jam and have all kinds of fun, just jamming to songs. I just started playing along with songs. But then as I developed and got a little more chops behind me, I wanted to explore other styles of music. And that's when I started taking a few lessons. So I learned more about jazz, and I learned more about Latin. I always had a feel for reggae. So I'm one of those who believes that any genre of music, there's probably a lot of crap, but there's also some really good stuff. I was a big elitist, like a lot of kids, like, oh, you got to be rock and roll, otherwise you sold out. Remember back in the day, anybody who went a little more on the pop side, oh, they sold out. Like, hey, why not? More people are going to like you, and you want to do a more ballady song. I've kind of gotten past that. But
did you grow up in the Vietnam? I think it sounds like you grew up in the Vietnam era. Am I correct?
In where? I'm sorry?
In the Vietnam era.
I grew up a little bit after that. I was born. I jokingly say I was born in the era of the beatniks, when people were snapping their fingers and being bohemians, and then I turned one. I was born in 59, so I caught the end of that, but I grew up with 3 older sisters. So I was a little younger, I really grew up more in the 70s, but because of my older sisters, I wanted to emulate them, and, the whole post-hippie thing and the kind of music, that has psychedelic, which led to the progressive rock. And then an era of music I really loved, but that never really stuck, with fusion. I thought fusion was the most awesome music ever. I'm really shocked that it never became a mainstay of music, because integrating, hard rock and funk with jazz and Latin and all that stuff, to just mix it all together. That, that's what I love is mixing it up. So, to learn about different rhythms and different around the world, it was really eye-opening. We're used to the downbeat, but in other rhythms, in the Latin and a lot of African, it's more upbeat and offbeat, and then a little bit of reggae where it's syncopated and offbeat, a little bit of funk, just mixing it up and having fun with it. That's how I like to play. On the drums, I play guitar, but I'm a lot more limited. Guitar, I'm all about rock and blues. That's about as far as I go.
Do you play music for your congregation?
I do. You know, it's funny. I have to laugh. It all backfired on me because, you know, as I mentioned, I'm a lazy drummer. I got tired of lugging drums around, so I did stand-up comedy. So now that I'm the rabbi, not only do I have to set up the sound system and the drum set, I also got to bring the Torah and the Ark and the prayer books. So all the schlepping that I tried to get away from, now I'm doing it and then some. But you know what? It keeps me humble. It keeps me humble.
You make adjustments, that which is the name of the game in life. You got to go with it a little bit. Who greased the way for you to become a rabbi? You mentioned your wife.
So here's what happened. When I met my wife, at the time I met her, she was already working at a religious school. She has more of a background in, she grew up a conservative. We have a mixed marriage. I grew up Orthodox. She grew up conservative. And she's from the South, and I'm from New York, so it was like the Civil War reenactment, getting the two families together for the wedding. It wasn't quite that bad, I kid. But so she is the one who recommended, hey, why don't you start teaching at religious schools? She's like, you have the Jewish background and you have a performance background. The kids would love you. The hourly rate was pretty good. And this was our big selling point, which she was right about, is it would help keep you in town. Because the level I was at as a comic at that time was the only way I could make any money was going on the road. Because a town like L.A., similar to San Francisco, you know, there's enough people who are willing to play for free, you know, for the what they call showcase nights, which basically means
open mic nights or showcase.
Yeah, open mic, I like, that's honest. But when they call it a showcase, it's like, oh, industry people will come to watch you. So, yeah, it's basically a glorified open mic night. But if you wanted to earn something and get to do a little more time and really hone your act, then you had to go out on the road. But I'm living in L.A. where now, like anyone else in L.A., I had an agent, and I was lucky to get a few commercials. You know, being on the road, I kept running into conflicts. Like, I'd be in town for like weeks, nothing. As soon as I'm on my way out of town, I get a call from my agent, oh, we got an audition for you. So she's like, hey, if you taught at religious school, you'd still do gigs around town at night. You'd still be able to do auditions, during the day, and you'd have a little regular income. I didn't realize she was thinking way ahead of me. She was like, look, if I'm going to get serious with this guy, I want him here in town, not gallivanting all around the U.S. and Canada. And it worked. Right. So I said, hey, you know what? I'll give it a shot. So first it was like just another day job, but it grew on me. After doing it for a couple of years, I realized, you know what? I love this, getting to work with the kids and approach life in Judaism in a much more open-minded, inclusive, and joyous way, getting away all the judgment and doing it more because I wanted to. I started to realize, wow, this is something I could really facilitate and do. And in a way, being a rabbi is not that different from being a comic. I just don't have the pressure of getting laughs per minute, Now, if I don't get a laugh, I could just make it a serious rabbinic moment, and then I get back to the laughs. At the right time. There are, appropriately serious times also. But, I've been very lucky to have the attitude of realizing that no matter how bad things look, there's still joy in the world. There's still miracles all around us. There's still things to cherish and appreciate, and it's up to us to do it. It's very easy to not see it because of all the darkness, and all the bad things. I mean, I'm not naive. I know firsthand suffering and illness and injustice. We can't change all that, so we can either fall into that black hole of negativity, or we can realize, look, on the other hand, there's still beauty all around us. There's inspiration all around us. There's awesome and creative and brilliant people all around us. It's up to us to take off the blinders and see it there, And it's not like it's up to us, like, out of a sense of obligation. It's like, well, what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be a Fabissiner, as they say in Yiddish, a bitter person your whole life that nobody wants to be around because you're always complaining about everything? Or are you going to find some positivity in things and things to cherish and appreciate? They're there. People who live through much more difficult times than we have now in so many ways. You look at the history of the world, they still manage to appreciate and cherish life. So it shouldn't be that hard for us to do it also. And I know it sounds kind of naive at times, but that's where I try to dwell as much as I can.
Hey, you're an upbeat guy, and most of all, as far as I'm concerned, you're a terrific guest.
I appreciate that. I know I'm not one of those you have to like dig that deep. You ask me one question and I'm off to the races.
No, and that's what I like. I like to listen and I like to glean information. One final question. Who influenced you as a rabbi when you were a kid? Which rabbi influenced you in your neighborhood?
I went through a lot of different phases. I was actually really into it for a while. They had, believe it or not, like trading cards, similar to baseball cards, for like different famous rabbis through the years, like the pictures
hookers
of the real.
Too. They had hookers too on trading cards.
I bet they did. I think I saw them in the same retail shop. In fact.
No, it depends on what you're looking for. It depends on what you're looking for. I admire your spirituality. Got to give you that. Anyone? I just want the name of one rabbi that stands out in your mind.
Well, that's interesting because growing up, I didn't have as many. There's a few. Like, first of all, I'm a big fan of, like, if I know the commentary of a specific rabbi, I want to know what their story is. Where did they live? When did they live? What was their life like? Because often the more you know about their life, you can understand why they would have the commentary they did. So I love the stories about Rashi. This guy lived around the year 1000 and an amazingly prolific writer. He did commentary on, like, the entire Jewish Bible and the entire Talmud. To even read all that is practically a lifelong ambition. But the fact that he commented on it, and back then it was on candlelight, dipping a quill into ink and writing it out letter by letter. The dedication he had and the beautiful spirit he had was really inspiring for me. Maimonides, I kind of have mixed feelings, but again, another like brilliant and prolific guy. So it gives me a lot of pride to know that I have a heritage of literally thousands of years of like just brilliant, inspiring people. But in my older days is when without naming names specifically, there's a lot of brilliant scholars and rabbis who were just blown away with life. The idea that we live on this planet, that we're alive, like the odds of it is like so minuscule. And then on top of it, to know that we have the ability to even contemplate these things, and that we have on top of that a rich heritage and history that we can tap into to see what other people felt was inspiring and special and holy. It just gives you a very positive outlook. Unfortunately, not all rabbis, not all religious leaders in general are like that. There's plenty who are all about, the brimstone and the fires and all the terrible things that are going to happen if you're not on the right path. But for me, religion in general, whether you like the word religion or not, or spirituality, whatever it is about finding the things that you can cherish and hold on to, and the things that bring you joy and meaning and purpose. And, to enjoy that experience. I don't see the sin in it. I don't feel there's any obligation to suffer in the world. There's enough of that as it is, and we all have our share throughout our lives one way or another. So let's concentrate on all the amazing things. Guys like Heschel, he's just like, you read his writings, he was just like totally enamored by the fact that he was able to do what he did.
You are a terrific guest, not just a great guest. You have me, I'm feeling good about humanity.
Enjoy it while you can.
I will, because it's a long afternoon. Things will change. Thank you, Ira. Ira Rosenfeld, Los Angeles comedian / rabbi.
Let's not forget, / lazy musician. And a little bit of an actor. Other than that, I don't like to blow my own horn too much.
But not too much. I got to tell you, if you don't do it, who's gonna?
Thank you. You know what? I don't know if you know this, but you just quoted the Pirkei Avot, the words of the fathers, which was written back around the year like 100 or so. If not now, when?
Who do you think you're talking? Who do you think wrote that stuff? Who do you think you're talking to?
All right. Well, just for your audience, for anybody who's not clear. Yeah, I love the fact that we can quote and read people who lived like thousands of years ago. And some of the writings, you look at it and go, oh, this is like current stuff, to realize, wait, they were dealing with the same issues, back then. That's pretty impressive.
Did you get a kick out of Mel Brooks in The 1,000-Year-Old Man?
Mel, you know what? The one Mel Brooks movie I really liked a lot. The problem was the timing, because for a while I had this kind of snotty attitude where I didn't like anything too goofy, because I'm like, I'm too intelligent a guy to. But then one day I realized, you know what? I'm just a goofy guy. I got to stop fighting it and realize, you know what? I don't have to act like I'm all, high society guy. I'm a goofy kind of guy, so let's give into it.
Hey,
so the one I like was Baseballs is my favorite one, actually.
You married a woman who wanted to keep you close at hand. You got to be a goofy guy on one level. You got to be a goofy guy on one level to go for that. Hey. Yeah,
I think that was really the key to my success. I always liked Weird Al Yankovic. He had that album Dare to Be Stupid. That was very enlightening because. Yeah, I don't have to prove how smart or how talented or whatever I am. I just want to be my goofy self, and for those who can relate, great. And if not, fine. You don't have to. Nobody can. I've learned you can't try to be, something for everyone, because if you are, then you're nothing for anybody. You got to do your thing, and those who can relate and who are into it, they will gravitate towards you. And it's not for everyone. I get it.
Basically, you just quoted Rick Nelson at a garden party. You got to be yourself. Really? And
the great Jewish philosopher Ricky Nelson. How about that?
Right, Epis. Hey, listen, Ira. Thank you. Time's running out.
All right, I got to thank you so much, Ralph. The one thing I feel remiss, although I guess all your listeners know already, I didn't get to hear more about your story, which I would love to do if we have a follow-up or to have off the recording. But I really appreciate
I would love to keep talking to you on a regular basis. I really enjoyed this, and I'm not just blowing smoke because I don't get to speak to many rabbis. And I wanted it to be a special place in heaven for me, although I don't deserve any of it. So,
I'm a fan of looking at the present. What will be will be. Let's look at you. Don't give up the present because you're worried about what piece of heaven you'll have in the future. Find what you got going on now.
I'm not worried. I have heaven on earth. Believe me.
I'm glad to hear. Awesome.
All right.
And I got to say, I thought we would be talking all about baseball and whatever else goes on up in the Bay Area and Humboldt County and everything up further north.
Well, I'll tell you, we could talk Humboldt County. I've brought Humboldt County with the legalization of what goes on in Humboldt County. I've brought it to my own little tent in Alameda, and it's all legal. And we can talk about that. We can talk about changing one's consciousness. More importantly, we can talk about the things not to have to do to change your consciousness. If you don't have to change your consciousness, you're all the more better. But if you do it voluntarily, that can be great. And we'll talk about that someday on the air. The marvelous cannabis. Ira, you're terrific. Come back and see us real soon.
Yeah, I look forward. Hey, if you're ever in the LA area, look me up. I always like to give people Ira's tour of LA.
Beautiful. Nate and Al's, I remember when I visited LA, I wonder if Nate and Al's is still there. The best deli in Los Angeles in the 70s.
In the 70s?
Nate and Al's, it's called.
I haven't heard of it. But then again, it's those are the kind of places they only go if somebody else is paying.
All right. Well, I'll try to get somebody to pay for both of us.
That would be great. If we all know if you have a podcast, sponsorship is the key. So let's see if we can get some sponsorship. That'd be awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ira. Have a nice day.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate having the chance. I thought we were going to just talk baseball, as I said. So this has been awesome. I look forward to talking to you again
next
soon.
time. I was proud of myself that I didn't talk baseball, and I talked to an adult for a second. As you know, I'm a baseball nut and crazy. I just completed a book. If you want to talk about me a little bit, a baseball book. It's called Comfortably Zoned in a Vat of Pine Tar. and just submitted a manuscript, and it's going to be published. Estimated time will be around the 5th of September. So I'm excited about that, and I'll send you a copy, and you can tell me what you think. I told you what I thought of you. You can tell me what you think of my book.
Awesome, and it's coming out right around High Holy Days. Since you had a plug, you just set me up for my little plug. Yeah, we're doing High Holy Days live as well as on Zoom this year. So
and isn't it nice that if your holy days are there, that they're high? That's nice.
We all want to. It's true. We always all want to start and end on a high note.
Yeah, as it were.
I'm guessing you might interpret a little bit differently than others, but
I do, and like you say, you got to be yourself. What can I tell you? All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I'm going to ask a favor of my audience real quick. If you could gather up some lightly used or new children's books and take them to the Head Start program in whatever city you live in, you'll be helping the kids. You help them develop a passion, become school ready. Books are a wonderful thing. So do me a solid, do Ira a solid, because it's a good idea. Wherever you live, just take a bunch of books to kids, and you'll help the environment and the community you live in. That's all I can ask. And happy trails, and stay well. Sei gesund, as Ira would say.
Thanks so much. You know what? I'm going to go to my garage. I think I got a bunch of children's books I can donate. You inspired me. I'm a big fan of doing something. It's nice to talk about good stuff when there's a time, but eventually you got to do also. So I'm going to go to my garage and dig up some books and donate them.
Beautiful. Just take them down there. They'll love you for it.
Awesome. And I'll get a tax-deductible write-off on top of it, huh? The double bonus.
Oh, boy, are you a Jew.
Well, you know, let's not get me started, but I thought when I became a rabbi there'd be a lot of good tax incentives. It didn't work out that way, so
it didn't work out that way. Do you pay taxes on the people that donate?
Sure.
No, you don't.
Even though it might be a gift from God and a gift of love, it still goes down as income for the community. Well, luckily we do have a nonprofit, so a lot of it goes through the organization, or Achad and Home Shul. But yeah, we still got to pay our taxes on it if we make enough money. When we're done with our expenses, and then once we bring in, it's not all that much, but we pay what we got to pay.
And you get to write it off. So, again, thanks for being here. Please come back.
All right. I look forward to speaking with you again. God bless. Take care. All righty.
Sei gesund. Adios, everybody. Thank you for listening. Ira Rosenfeld is the guest. I'm the host and the producer, Ralph Zig Tiger. The length of it all. Adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.